So how's it going today, guys? Nice, nice. So, as has already been covered, my name's Dave Thompson. I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm sorry if I start to get a little hoarse on you. Uh, I'm the first piece of Michigan talent that they brought in today to talk to you guys. I'm rounding out the culture portion of the presentations. Things are going to start getting a little bit more technical from here on out, from what I saw on the schedule. So, what I'm going to be talking with you about today, actually, we'll do it in slide order. So, who am I? I'm the chief systems engineer at a company called DeepField in downtown Ann Arbor. Some of you guys may be familiar. It's a really small firm, so I'll just describe in like a sentence what we do, which is like large-scale network telemetry. What that means basically is we take the various types of flow and other types of network data that you can pipe into us, process it, chew it, spit it out, and provide you with sort of insight as to what's going on in your network. We work with some really large carriers, and this is information that's useful for them. So my background, computer scientist by training, systems engineer, I think by vocation. I kind of found it after I got out of school. And I don't know, cook, man about town, voracious eater. And like Brian mentioned a moment ago, I'm a Michigan ex-expat, which is to say I did the boomerang thing. So what am I up here to talk with you guys about today? Actually not anything about skills or technology. Slightly closer, I actually haven't seen attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion, but on the other hand, I'm going to survive through this presentation, hopefully. So actually, what I'm here to talk about is to give you guys some industry analysis and some recon data about what it's like out west, sort of some of the decisions that I made out there and why I went, and why you might or might not be interested in doing that, and finally why I came back and sort of what Michigan's batting and why you might want to be here instead. So unfortunately, in order to do that, I got to talk about myself a little bit. Yeah, right. This is what I was doing last night. Anyway, so we're going to go through the character creation slides, and then we'll have to do a little bit of early game to get you guys caught up, and then we'll talk about what I did out in the Bay Area, okay? So first off, my education. I'm sort of putting this up here because I want to make it clear up front. I was not a rock star student. My GPA was sort of, mediocre. I meandered through school. I did well in the classes that I was interested in, not so much in the ones that I didn't or wasn't. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is there's sort of this myth that in order to be successful or to get out to the Bay Area, you've got to have, whatever. It's harder than getting into MIT, right? Factually false. It depends a lot more, I think, on your skills and your background, and we'll go into that a little bit more in a few minutes. Experience. So, you'll see Domino's Pizza on here twice. Technically, at least it used to be, that was not permitted by policy, but at the first time around, I was a contractor. Other than that, internship at the University of Michigan in a department that no longer exists. Java developer at Covacent, which is no longer part of CompuWare, and sysadmin in that same organization at the U of M that no longer exists. And then finally, like my last gig out here before I moved, lead cloud engineer at Domino's Pizza. So I know that I have some sort of other fellow ex-Domino's folks here today. A lot of us worked on the same project. It was a really cool project, which was basically building the Domino's online ordering system. The pizza tracker, all of this stuff was all part of the same thing. Probably might be the most famous thing that I've ever touched in terms of like brand appeal. I learned a lot at Domino's that I think served me in good stead when I moved out west about like building a team, working with a small software organization. A lot of the stuff that we were talking about earlier today that the presenters before me discussed was spot on, right? Things like group cohesion, how critical it is, the difficulty of getting anything done when you have, we'll say, internecine strife. Wow, that was from my philosophy background. We'll say bad group dynamics, right? So, the tendency in a lot of companies, and I think that Domino's historically was, representative, right, is there was a wall built right down the middle of the company, and you had, the engineering infrastructure organization on the one hand, and you had the new e-commerce organization building this online ordering system on the other hand. And I think that I was brought on basically to be a mole in the e-commerce organization for the infrastructure system, because otherwise the only way to get things done was to pass notes through a small slot in the wall that you had to unlock. And so we managed to widen that a little bit, and we got a much broader piece of throughput, but what I think was the real key was everybody was in alignment with regards to what they were trying to accomplish, right? So I guess what it really comes down to is everybody was in alignment that we wanted to continue to sell pizza, because apparently that was the reason that we were there. And as a result, there was a lot of buy-in from executive staff that we should do that. So one other thing that I learned at Domino's that has served me in good stead in my career, and I'm going to do just a few of these sort of career hack things as I go through this presentation. If you can get into the first of a new role, like the first posting in a new role or function at a company, and that function is growing, you will grow your career with it. And that definitely was the case for me at Domino's. So, all of that said, and it being a great position and a great team, why did I move? In general, I was pretty satisfied with my career development up to that point. But what I was frustrated with was, I think, the feeling that most of the organizations, like the companies that there are here in Michigan, are very big, sort of stodgy, and there's a very sort of Fortune 500 company attitude in terms of how to do things. I suspect that probably a lot of folks here have at least thought about going out west, and I feel like a lot of us think that they just know how to do things better. Your Googles, your Facebooks, your LinkedIns, and what have you, right? And definitely that was what I was hoping when I went out there. So, sorry. How many of you have ever done a big cross-country move? Okay. I was really intimidated by this, so it took me a while to actually even consider applying out west, right? And other things aside included, I knew that my GPA wasn't that great. I knew that I didn't have killer tech industry experience and that sort of thing. But the frustration kind of mounted, and at one point I just dropped my resume out to Netflix, and astoundingly, they went from receiving my resume, flying me out, interviewing me, interviewing me and giving me an offer, had a 2-hour break in between, and then shipping my stuff back and shipping me back and putting me in corporate housing, all in the space of about 6 weeks. And it was smoother than you could even reasonably imagine. So if you ever have to move across country, I highly recommend convincing some large-scale company to pay for it for you. I'm going to bounce back to this slide for a sec. So I guess what I forgot to mention is, the reason why I talked with Netflix in particular, how many of you folks have ever read the Netflix culture deck? Okay, looks like 20% maybe. Look, there are some must-reads in DevOps, right? Phoenix Project has come up a couple of times now. There are a couple of books on automation and stuff like that that are really important. I think that although I don't think the word DevOps comes up once in the culture deck, and Adrian Cockcroft is famous for going on record that they do no ops. The fact of the matter is that most software engineering organizations at Netflix have a DevOps person. They're embedded into the software part of the org, and it's integral to the way that they function. And you see this pattern in the other major league startups out there in terms of embedding people that have more of an operations or systems perspective into software orgs. So I read the culture deck. There were certain things in there that spoke to me that had to do with The critical one is freedom and responsibility, which I'm going to discuss in more depth later. But the concept fundamentally is if you give somebody the responsibility to take care of a task, whatever it is, you're now free of it. It is no longer the thing you have to be concerned about. They have the responsibility to make the decisions about how they're going to satisfy that requirement, and they have the responsibility for the results of it. So what this leads to at Netflix is sort of a system of delegation that allows these smaller orgs to self-organize, right, and make their own intelligent decisions, and then occasionally be answerable for when they don't work out. Also, they comp really well. So anyway, I've landed my dream job. I'm driving across country. My stuff has already been picked up and shipped by white glove movers, which again, excellent experience, highly recommended. The first day that we're basically taking historical Route 66 to get out there. The first night in St. Louis, Missouri, we get into the hotel room and I open up the news. It was an interesting moment in Netflix's history. So this weighed on my mind for the rest of the drive, and it resulted in, we'll say it was tumultuous times for Netflix, right? They took that back, and it's surprisingly difficult to find a decent Quickster logo online nowadays. It was also a great time to buy never used DVDs and video games if you wanted them out of the Quickster stockpile. But fast forwarding through Netflix, because I don't really want to go long on, whatever the time that I spent there, there definitely were some lessons learned, right? First, like I mentioned before, freedom and responsibility. I guess, what we struggle with, right, is scaling a company and figuring out how to make it so that people are able to do the things that they need to do and to empower people so that they're not frustrated and don't become disenfranchised. There's a really good Harvard Business Review report out there, and I wish I had the link right now, but basically it shows that up to 50% of employees out there, just employees in general, report being disengaged or very disengaged from their work. So what does that translate to in terms of productivity and actually getting shit done? Not much, right? And somebody who's very disengaged in their work is not just not like pushing you forward, they're actually net drag. So how do you avoid that? Well, you make people feel valued, right? This is necessary. And you don't have to be like, I liked Hug Ops earlier, I dug that. You don't have to be like a big hugger to accomplish that. You reward people when they do good work, and the best way to show them that you trust their judgment is to let them make judgments, right? Other than that, institutional leverage. So institutional leverage was something that you see a lot, and I think that it was just something that eventually I felt like it needed a name, right? So this is the fact that when you have a conversation, like a roundtable of people talking, and maybe this came up more at Netflix because we had roundtables of people with all sorts of different levels, title levels in the org. If they all speak at like the same volume, with their institutional position in the company, some people get drowned out and they will get quiet, right? Because a director naturally is speaking through a megaphone when they're talking to an individual contributor engineer. You see people with different like emotional intelligence, right, handle this different ways. Some people are totally unaware of it or they want to reject it. And those people, they have a way of sort of overriding the small voices in the room that are telling them things that they probably should be listening to. And again, this goes back to disenfranchisement, disengagement, and failure eventually. The third thing that I picked up, I guess, was maybe more personal. So I've got this metaphor. You guys can tell me how broken it is or not. I'm really fond of it. The question here, right, backpacking versus the Four Seasons is, how would you prefer to spend your vacation? Are you more into the idea of sort of bivouacking into a place that's, pristine lake, alpine, air, beautiful vista, no other humans, and you got to dig a latrine, you got to pitch a tent, maybe you got to go fish for your dinner and so on? Or are you more interested in going to a hotel, every accommodation has already been made for you, the most difficult thing you have to do is sort of pick what you want off of the room service menu. If that's your preference, then working at one of the, we'll say the big 15 or so companies out west, definitely for you. Because for any problem that you're likely to run into, a solution has already been engineered by an entire team of people. What I found was that I like touching everything. I think that's sort of part of what makes DevOps for a lot of us. And I got really frustrated as I realized that the ownership share that I could have of the total tech stack was actually relatively narrow. So all these things put together made me think startup. How many of you folks work at a company that's, say, less than 100 people? Oh, wow. Okay, awesome. I'm going to use basic logic and assume that the other portion of people work for a company that's larger than 100 people. So that being the case, I'll talk to you guys, actually, because the folks that work for a smaller company already know what I'm going to say. When you work for a small company, you have an opportunity to make decisions and touch parts of the business you would never even, it would never occur to you that you would touch. And the smaller the company, the broader your scope is. I'm now at DeepField, a company that was 21 and is now approaching 40. I'm involved in marketing conversations. I talk with the CFO on a daily basis about P&Ls and stuff like that. This is not your typical systems engineered stuff, right? So I think that it kind of goes again to this concept of, do you want to be sort of like really expert in a smaller area or really, a generalist? And how general? Well, one way to determine that is if you found a company, you start out as a team of one, right? So then you're the whole thing. And then you have to start delegating certain items. So this is what I decided that I wanted to do. And actually, at that time, had never worked at a company smaller than maybe, 1,000 people. So it was a little bit of a leap, but I was making a guess. So I just want to take a sec, and this is one of those, I don't know, maybe it's career hack, or maybe this is just extraneous information, but to talk about startups, and really, like, especially the way they're viewed out in Silicon Valley, but the IPO lottery, the IPO slot machine, and sort of the way that tech industry plays out there. So, Article 1, any jerk with an idea can get venture capital right now. It's ridiculous. It's actually like, I don't think I ever actually had somebody tell me that they wanted to do like Spotify for pets, but this is a believable thing that somebody could be working away diligently in some co-working center on Spotify for pets. You see, like, much like if you go to Los Angeles and everybody has a script that they want to sell, everybody has an app, or everybody has some piece of technology that they want to do. And if they don't have that, then they might be, they're salespeople, they want to sell you their company's app, and so on, right? It's all technology all the time. It's ridiculous. You go into a bar, and the conversations you overhear are people talking about market share, and I don't know. It's actually kind of overwhelming. The phrase culture shock comes to mind. It's cool at first. Anyway, so anybody can get VC. What this means is these startups are not always super well vetted. That's my generous way of putting it. A typical startup doesn't necessarily have a very good chance of exit. And when I say not a very good chance of exit, I mean possibly negligible, right? So you can maximize the chances that the company that you're looking at, whether you're considering it for investment or you're considering it, to go work in it, which is the ultimate investment, right? By a few factors. The first one, like number one with a bullet, do they have revenue? If they don't have revenue, then come back when they have revenue. Because if there's nothing that guarantees they're ever going to be able to monetize their model. If they do have revenue, that's great. The next question is it growing? Because a lot of companies stall out at some point, and they get into this dreaded VC zombie state where they're never going to quite make any kind of event, and they're never going to be so be at such a drain that they get killed. And you'd be surprised how many companies can linger like long after their natural life that way. Next question is, who are the founders? You want to talk with the founders if you possibly can, but at the very least you want to know what their track record is. The founders have taken a company successfully through IPO in the past. or through any kind of liquidity event, then the chances that this company is going to be successful are radically improved. Third, what's the product? I mean, this is sort of elementary, right? It's like, I said Spotify for pets. This does not pass like my bar of something that I would pay for. And as a result, this is not a company that I would engage with. On the other hand, some people may be into that idea, in which case, I don't pretend to be, we'll say, a market prophet. I thought the iPhone was going to fail. So then finally, and maybe the single most important thing, right, is all other things being equal, probably the most important question is, do they have the right position for you? Because if you go to a cool startup and have a great work experience and come out of it having advanced your career, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whatever. All of us want to cash out and buy a Rolexus or a Tahitian island or something. But you can bear the resets a lot better if your time was not wasted and you learned a lot and you're now positioned to do even better in your next job. So that said, I found a company that did all this for me, which was MuleSoft back in 2012. They checked the boxes, basically, as you can see. They're pre-IPO business to business. I like business to business because, again, I'm not that great with other human beings, especially in large quantities. So the working with other engineers at other companies and that sort of thing, that's great. They had, at the time, just a little bit over 100 employees. They were showing that growth curve that every venture capitalist lusts after in their heart. And critically, they were looking to hire their first DevOpsy, SRE sort of person. So I got to be it. This was a great job. I mean, just to be clear, this validated everything I thought or hypothesized about working at a smaller company. I had an awesome boss, which is obviously not guaranteed if you go to a small firm, but I lucked out, I guess. The work was interesting. The culture was cool, and whatever. As the frosting, we were located down at Grant and Geary, which is basically central downtown San Francisco. So that was neat. That said, it only took a couple of years because, fun fact, if the startups are successful, they grow. And they don't grow slowly. I'm tempted to use words like metastasize, to describe what they do. But we doubled twice while I was there, which is just, in other words, for those of us that have done arithmetic, 4x over the course of 2 years. In basically every way. We were still pre-IPO, although obviously maybe less pre-IPO than we had been before. Companies are notoriously cagey about that out there, especially as they get into that sort of runway space. And by the time that I was starting, my gaze was starting to wander, I had a team of 6, well, myself plus 5, located some in San Francisco, some in Argentina. Really cool folks. I would love to work with any of them again, but it's sort of difficult to move engineers from Argentina to Michigan for a variety of reasons, which we can discuss if anybody's interested. And yeah, we went from having basically one SaaS product to an entire suite of them, and we were working on an on-prem product as well. So pretty interesting times. I learned a few things at MuleSoft, much like my lessons learned at Netflix, that are probably worth mentioning. The first one is that scaling a company this fast creates a lot of stress, like cultural stress. Those of us that, I guess, and probably most of the people in here have done some physics, right? You might be familiar with Hooke's law, right? Which is that a system can only deform so much and return to its original position. If you try to push it beyond the bounds of elasticity, it deforms sort of permanently, right? You have to be very careful. I find that this, if not technically, at least metaphorically applies to we'll say organizations and culture. You can only pack so many new people into a company at a time before the culture just radically changes on you, and it can happen really quickly. So the second item actually is closely related, which is the importance of technical leadership. So one of the things that I've noticed in this industry in general, and I mean, I think this is widespread. You guys can fact check me if you care to. I feel like engineering leadership, like management per se, is grossly undervalued. in the sense that everybody sort of reluctantly takes on the role of being a manager and clings to whatever technical tasks as long as they possibly can, because I think that's really where a lot of us get sort of our sense of self-valuation, right? It's part of our identity. We want to hack on stuff. It's also fun. So the challenge there, right, is that when you are growing a company at double per year, basically what that means is that you're having to install new leaders constantly. If you really only have maybe 3 options. You grow the leadership from within, right? You identify people, maybe choose to hire people that have the potential to do that, so that on the understanding that it will not be long before you will need them to rise to the occasion. Other possibility is that you hire people in. This can be really harmful, right? It can work, but it can also be harmful because, one, people that have been there even for 12 months feel like they have more of a claim on that leadership position than some random person that you're bringing in off the street from some other company. So it can be culturally toxic. And then beyond that, the person that hiring is always risky, right? What do? We interview, maybe we get some references, and then we bring somebody in and we give them the opportunity to totally destroy the company that we work for. You're just adding a force multiplier to that when you were talking about managers or leadership, right? Because the fact is you can make one bad hire there and they can nuke your team. You could have a totally functional team and they can be obliterated. The third possibility is to let it happen like it happens, like organic growth. And the result of that, in my experience, has been that people that are unqualified and maybe have no aptitude for leadership wind up in leadership roles, usually by seniority or as a reward for something. This leads to its own like system of problems and disincentives. And smart compromises, I think this one is sort of obvious, especially to anybody who's worked in a smaller organization or under pressure. You have to be intelligent about the things that you leave on the table, technically. Even organizationally sometimes, right? Because you can't address every problem, and you're going to have to come back later to do some. Choose the ones that it will be possible to come back and fix later. Okay, one other lesson, and this is a slight digression. I'm going to bang through it because I know that I'm running slightly long here. So Dunbar's number, have any of you guys ever heard of Dunbar's number? Oh, that's awesome. I get to teach you something interesting. Okay, so Robin Dunbar is an anthropologist from Britain, okay? He has a hypothesis that the number of stable relationships a primate can maintain, sort of like an active cache, is directly correlated with the size of their neocortex. And this relationship holds true for everything from lemurs to bonobos and so on. So extrapolating from Dunbar's number for all of these different cases, and where we can see the neocortex size, tribe size, direct relationship, okay? Dunbar's number for humans is somewhere in the neighborhood of 150. There are other anthropologists that have suggested it could be even as much as twice that, but definitely probably not more than that, definitely probably. This is whatever. It's a hypothesis, right? However, while I was at MuleSoft, I got to be there while we blew Dunbar's number, okay? It was real interesting. Definitely the culture and the work atmosphere changed over the course of maybe 3 months. I did a very scientific study where I checked with several of my coworkers, and they also identified this as a time of relative change. Realistically, right, that's one experience. I'm looking forward to running through a few more companies, hopefully getting to that magic number and past it, and seeing if it starts to bear out. I would love to see some research by Harvard or what have you to see where that place is. But the interesting thing about Dunbar's number is that when you break that number, it is the further hypothesis that is the point at which we start having to put social structure in place of those human connections. So maintaining a flat hierarchy becomes really difficult at that point because everybody doesn't know everybody. So I found that wasn't working for me. So as MuleSoft was getting ready to double again, which I haven't been there for a little while, but presumably it's right in the middle of doing right now, I decided that, big was not so great for me. And small was pretty good. But what if I did something like eensy beensy? And that's what brought me to DeepField. So DeepField is interesting technology. Like I said, I mean, whatever, it's real nerd stuff, right? Not everybody is interested in writing C and analyzing S-flow and stuff like that. But if you are, see me after class. Anyway, it was an opportunity for me to up my technical game because this was like networking. We have, like our founder, Craig Lebovitz, is like one of the founding fathers of BGP. He worked on NSFNet back in the day before there was an internet. Real interesting guy. He lights up, I mean, he lights up in a way that's actually sort of disturbing if you try to talk with him about BGP. This is a topic that he's passionate about the way some people are passionate about like sports or Fallout 4. Nice, still good for a hoot. Anyway, one of the reasons that I was looking at DeepField in the first place because one of my old coworkers from CompuWare had been hired there as like employee, either number 1 or number 2. This is a matter of some contention. So, you know, one of the things I guess that I learned is that a company that hires well, that's usually a very strong sign of like future performance. And one of the ways you can tell a company hires well is when they hire people that you think are good people for them to hire. The team, you know, I flew out to meet everybody, incredibly bright people. I mean, literal rocket scientists, or I guess literal particle physicists on the team. So that part was neat. Got to geek out with the folks. And then finally, it was a tiny startup, right? 21. To me, that's very small. It's difficult for me to imagine a role for somebody like me, like, you know, a lead systems engineer in a company much smaller than that, unless I was founding a product or something. So this is probably the next closest minimal size. So I want to circle back to some of the questions that I sort of was thinking about earlier with regards to the Bay Area, right? Why somebody might want to go out there, what you might find when you get there, I guess this inferiority complex thing that we seem to have going for them, and to a lesser extent, New York City, Austin, Boulder, Colorado, Seattle, Portland, right? All these different tech hubs. Why are they tech and we're like Rust Belt, right? The biggest difference that I saw out there was just the flood of venture capital. Like, there's money for everything, like ridiculous money for everything. And you guys may be familiar with a show called Silicon Valley. It's actually a documentary. I feel like I met those guys while I was out there. I definitely overheard them at the bar. It was, anyway, unsettling experience. So there are more engineers out there than you can reasonably imagine, right? Imagine a number of engineers that could, like all of Ann Arbor could be nothing but engineers, right? That's what they have in the Bay Area. So you just stumble over people talking tech constantly. There's a network effect that happens there that is definitely to their advantage, right? Because the ability to sort of, I'm thinking about a problem, I've got a friend across the hall who's thinking about a similar problem. We commingle our ideas and sort of genetic algorithm-wise come up with something that hopefully might even be better. And then you go to the bar and there's another person and they're talking about it. And it's like, you find yourself immersed in it. It's like if you want to learn a language, the best way to learn it is to go to Spain to learn Spanish, right? So the network effect there is a distinct advantage. Other than that, I think that what the Bay Area has going for them is they've basically stolen a march on us. They're a couple years ahead in terms of like DevOps, right? The DevOps technologies that we're talking about, these were all pioneered by companies in Silicon Valley, small, medium, large. Like I had a friend, I needed to talk with the other presenter a little while ago, but I missed him. I had a friend who was working at Cloud Foundry. The Cloud Foundry team was working at Pivotal Labs, literally a block from where I was at in my office in San Francisco. And then, just around the block from there was another company, and down the street from there was another, and just this ridiculous sort of setup. There's a ton of companies that are like in the couple hundred size, and they're a little bit ahead, a year, 2 years, doing DevOpsy stuff. And then there's the majors, as like I refer to them at least, which are probably a few years ahead of that. These are your Facebooks, your LinkedIns, and what have you. And then sort of standing alone and proud is Google, right? And we don't actually know how far ahead of us they are. But here's the thing. It's possible to make this time up. And I'm speaking generally about the industry, but one of the things that was really interesting to me and sort of primed me to start thinking about coming home was I saw Jamie and Right Brain were having an AWS AWS meetup, and they called out phrases like salt stack management and EC2 and VPC, and basically a bunch of technologies that I was at that moment in time using at MuleSoft to bring up our infrastructure. So, I mean, there's nothing that says that we can't adopt these technologies and catch that up. And we're working on the venture capital thing, but realistically, I don't think that we want to be swamped with an enormous amount of dollars looking for homes. I mean, it sounds good personally, don't get me wrong, but it's really interesting to watch the way that one thing that you would learn if you went to Silicon Valley is the way that perverts a culture. So that's worth checking out. Should you move? I can't make any recommendations here, right? There's no like one-size-fits-all career advice I can give. I think that for people that are earlier in their career, there's an opportunity to go out there and learn a bunch of new stuff. And realistically, from a brand perspective, putting a Halo brand on your resume is not going to hurt your career. I definitely, Netflix helped me. Probably, I don't have MIT on my resume, but I feel like Netflix got me in similar sorts of doors that might have. You're probably wondering if you're going to be able to like be successful out there. The answer to probably, I would say, most of the people in this room is yes. And you'd be surprised, like it's more difficult to get a gig as a software developer in Silicon Valley than it is to get a DevOps gig because they're so hungry for us. They need us so badly. And they know it, right? They're still trying to find this out here in Southeast Michigan, but they know in Silicon Valley that you throw these people on the fire and the fire gets bigger and then things move much faster. There's also, I guess there's an opportunity to pull the arm on the IPO one-arm bandit. But I mean, that opportunity is starting to exist here as well, right? We're starting to have companies that are legit startups that give people equity and give you an opportunity to actually, play that game. I'm very close to the end, and I know that I'm over time. I'm going to try to accelerate this a little bit. Why did I come home? First and foremost, frankly, family, right? And I mean, really the bond that I've got with this state. This is a really cool place. They don't tell you this, but Northern California doesn't have seasons. So it's pretty neat to be able to see like leaves fall and things like that. Other than that, the cost of living out there eats up a lot of that ridiculous engineer's salary you hear about. When you're paying $2,500 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, like a junior, it's generous to call it a one-bedroom apartment, then you start to reconsider whether you're actually going to get ahead with even the generous salary you can get out there. And then finally, I think that there's sort of a special opportunity in the Rust Belt and really in the Southeast Michigan region in particular right now. And the reason is, the opportunity at DeepField, things autocorrect. Awesome. Anyway, the opportunity at DeepField aside, the thing is that we're doing some interesting stuff here. We're getting to bootstrap a tech scene, right? The last people that did this, like, really, they're all, they were like with Hewlett Packard and places like that out in Silicon Valley, and they've since retired to their like, I don't know how people like that live, but they're doing things that we can't imagine right now. So there's a chance to actually create a tech scene here, from the kindling. We've got like the start of a fire, right? And we can make it our own. We don't have to do what Silicon Valley has done, what New York City, God forbid, what New York City has done, Austin, and so on, right? We can make this. We can bring our own identity, right? About being industrial and being hard-ass workers, which, by the way, that myth is not entirely untrue. Detroit definitely brings its A game in terms of cranking out the hours, right? And so on. So there's a chance for us to do something like different. I personally, that's everything else in this deck aside, I wouldn't have been able to justify coming home if I didn't feel like I could do something interesting here. And this, again, is that question, right? Do you want to go camping and sort of build something from scratch, or do you want to move into the Hilton? When I realized that was the question, sort of the decision was obvious for me. All right, questions? Thank you.